Are we okay? Ready to go? Okay. Welcome, everybody. It is February 3rd, 2025, and everyone in this room is part of history. You are here for the very first official meeting of the Billings City Council, in this case, a work session in our new City Hall. So thanks for being part of history. Thanks for being here on a very cold, very snowy evening. This is a work session of the Billings City Council, so our policy or our procedures are a little more informal. We don't make formal votes tonight, with the possible exception of giving direction to staff. The idea is to learn and to have discussion. And before we get into our regular agenda, I'll just comment that I don't know if we've got copies of the agenda tonight. There's two items on a regular agenda. First is the utility billing conversion, software conversion audit. And then the second, the Billings MPO Transportation Alternatives Program discussion. I'll also ask our city administrator in just a minute to give us a little bit of an update on where we're at with plowing, since I'm sure that's something that'll be of interest to everyone in the community. But before we get into our regular meeting, and I do ask for your apology or your patience in advance if we have some technical hiccups, just because it's the first time we've used the room, but the sound sounds great to me. And I do want to put out a special shout out to all the city staff who've worked on bringing this building into a usable state over the last couple of years. Kevin Ifland, John Catarino, Jessica Fust, all of their great staff have done a great job. Chris Kukulski, thank you guys. If it doesn't go well tonight, blame me. How about that? So anyway, welcome everyone. Our first order of business, and very exciting, is oath of office for our new appointee to the Ward 3 council seat, TJ Rogers. So with that, TJ, can I ask you to come to the podium? And we're fortunate to have Judge Sheila Kolar administer the oath of office, and I'll turn it over to the judge. If anybody needs or would like to take photos, feel free. With that, Judge.
I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, Constitution of the State of Montana, the Charter of the City of Billings, and that I will discharge my duties of my office with fidelity. So help me God. To the mayor, to my fellow council members, I'm very excited to be joining you guys. And thank you for this city, this community, for the other candidates for this role. I really appreciate you guys. And I hope to do a good job and earn your trust.
I just had to say that I had to be here tonight. Denise has said that her one regret is that after all the work that she and I both put into here, she was very disappointed that she had to be in Helena instead of here today. My name is Danny Chiricki. I live in Ward 3, and tonight I want to talk about the importance of Main Street over Wall Street here in Billings, Montana. Main Street represents the backbone of our local economy, where our small businesses thrive, where our neighbors work, and where our community comes together. These businesses are owned and operated by people we know, our friends, our family, and our neighbors. They provide jobs, support local charities, and contribute to the unique character of our town. Wall Street, on the other hand, is distant and disconnected from our daily lives. While it plays a significant role in the national and global economy, its impact on Billings is less direct. The fluctuations of the stock market can seem like an abstract concept, because in reality, in our daily lives, it is an abstract concept. And for most Americans and most residents of Billings, it is less than an abstract concept because it has nothing to do with our capital, our money, our flow, or anything like that. The reason I mention this is that I have been a member of the Beartooth Resource and Conservation District, which is one of the 3 economic development areas that covers Billings and the area around it. And I wanted to point out that in December alone, over $250,000 were distributed to businesses in the 5-county region in the program which is known as Growth Through Ag Projects. This is where money from the federal government is being spent, is being given to local businesses in order to take local agricultural products and turn them into food that becomes available on our tabletops. This is an incredibly important program. I want to close by just kind of listing off, well, no, first I want to say this. All of these different programs, even though they're in the 5 different counties around us, Billings is the major market for these different places. So what is happening, the money, the $50,000, $20,000, whatever, that happens there directly impacts consumers here. We have bakeries and Red Lodge receiving money. We have a whole number of different meat packing plants which have been started up and are happening here now. One of my personal favorites is Speedy and Flow's sweet corn, which I pick up down on South Billings Boulevard in order to do that. It's Yellowstone Pasta Company. The eggs that you get from the Hutterite colonies, the Hutterite colonies received money for in order to increase their egg production and whatnot. So in the last thing that I want to say about this is really, really, really important stuff. Beartooth is very important to our economy, and the other 3rd economic development organization that we don't have a current relationship with the city or the council is the Native American Development Council. And I really think that we need to be seriously looking into making that relationship real. Thank you very much.
Hello, hello. Oh, sorry, I was waiting for the timer. Hi, my name is Sullivan Hebner. I'm a resident here in Billings, up in Ward 2. That's up in the Heights for anybody else who tends to forget where they live, like me. I am a student, well, was a student of Montana State University Billings until 2 Decembers ago, so that was really great. In fact, I've lived most of my life here in Billings, most of the parts that matter, at least. This is the place where I've grown up. I went to school, high school, went to college, got my first job and my most recent job, made good money, made bad money, went destitute, went homeless, went broke, got back on my feet, fell off them again, and now I'm back on the horse. Now, I'm concerned about Billings a little bit. Actually, I'm aligned with the organizers who put together the protests this weekend. First and foremost, we thank you for letting us protest down at the Metro Park, and we also thank all of BPD for coming down and helping make sure that everything went smoothly and peacefully. I understand that there were some aggressive actions down there against our people on the ground, but that the BPD put it down. So again, we thank you for that. However, we do want to, after in the post, since we have your ear, put a couple questions just to the council and to the city of Billings. First and foremost, we are concerned that the BPD may cooperate with ICE or immigration enforcement agents if they come to this city. We'd like to ask if the council could take a stance and let us know if that will or won't be happening. Furthermore, I'm concerned that everyone of lesser means in the city may be well impacted. As the loans and grants and everything else was paused the other day, my greatest fear was, I wonder if they're going to get back to me about my Medicaid. Because it would suck if I had to go off my pills or go off my prescriptions. And I have to wonder for anybody who's on WIC or SNAP or any other federal assistance, what they think here in our town. So I guess my question here, question number 2 is, if and when issues come to Billings people by federal freezes or federal actions, what's the plan to make sure that people don't get hurt, that they don't lose their health care or lose their food assistance or lose their housing? A lot of this money is not coming from within the state, but from without the state, and I think it's important that we safeguard it. Speaking of safeguarding, over the last couple of days, we have seen the systematic dismantling of many of our country's institutions. My question for you very directly then is, how is that going to be prevented here in Billings? When the federal government comes knocking at your door saying, we don't like this regulation you passed, or we don't like this ordinance, or we don't like this DEI initiative, will you push back, or will there be anticipatory obedience, as was shown by the county commissioner in his movement to try and give the metro over to our federal government? Now, I know that what I'm saying doesn't really track with every voter here, and I absolutely recognize that. I wore purple today, not only my favorite color, but red and blue combined, hopefully so we can stand in the middle ground. My concerns are less about the political impact here, but more about us, the people. We don't want to lose what we've gained so far, and we'd like to ask you to help us protect it. Thank you.
Public comment and request. My name is Warren Lee Esri, 4145 Jansel, Billings, Montana. My concern is 911 number 1 question asked. Are the cops going to show up? Now, you all had a meeting over at the library, and the reason why that's number 1 is they don't. Real quick, Admin Park is 3 city blocks away from Admin Park. That's where my granddaughter was having a problem with a young man. He's 16, she's 14. Hour and 30 minutes. 3 blocks. And one of those blocks only has 3 houses. Now, my next request is a vote of confidence for St. John. That is in itself enough records that you have during that last meeting. Another area, 115% over overtime. In order to do that, you have to spend all the overtime, get reimbursed 100%, and spend an additional 15%. Now, if the number 1 question at the 911 center is, are they going to show up? I wonder why you're paying them. Officers that have been put on administrative leave without pay, your records say so. Yeah, they get paid. Just hand in some overtime. I'm still waiting on the IRS. Not only audits cities, but they have their own investigators. I'm waiting 2 years now for them to conclude. So, I have like 4 or 5 items, take about an hour and a half. Not here, not now, and 3 minutes. Give me 5. Even Judge Kohler gave me a couple extra days in jail, free of charge. This request is going for out all those officers that like to play with the back side of your car, leave their fingerprints on. St. John's crime area. There are only 6 unanswered for city blocks in Billings, Montana that ain't a crime area, according to St. John and his police department. Now, this is over 5 years. Oh, this is a crime area over here. Oh, this is a crime area over there. The 6 blocks, you're in one of them. But then St. John says downtown is a crime area. The reason they leave their fingerprints on their back of your car, yeah, I pulled him over here at that time. They're leaving evidence. They're making up evidence. Sacramento, California Department of Justice, they reviewed it, said, yeah, send us every video you got of cops doing that. Give me one more minute. Also, stop. So in order to begin the process of cleaning up the police department, and God, you guys have gotten 30, 40% new cops. They're good cops. They don't got to be corrupted by the others. End it by a request a vote of confidence be taken, and you don't have to take it. You can take it, keep him. He can retire or quit. Those are the 5 ways you can go with that. But it's on record. Thank you. And sorry for going over time.
Hi, I'm Christy Drake. I'm at 2950 Walden Place, and I broke my wrist playing pickleball on Saturday. So I have come here for the past 3 or 4 years without a break, but I have to live up to my name. Anyway, I'm just here to talk about the Transportation Alternatives Program. Billings TrailNet has, conducted a survey for the past couple of years and has asked constituents all over the city about which trails that they really want to see happen. And the Fifth Avenue corridor and the Yellow Jacket Trail, aka the 27th Street side path, were like neck and neck, the highest rated. So I just wanted to let you know that we are doing a feasibility study right now, and we're hoping that it's going to be finished by early March in time to possibly have a transportation alternatives grant application. We would need to have a city sponsor because Billings TrailNet can't do the apply. But I just want to remind you, please, that trails like that, like the Yellow Jacket Trail, wouldn't be possible without transportation alternatives, because that 1.7 million, and who knows, maybe the feasibility study will come in at 3 or 5 million, and then it'll be a moot point. But we just want to make sure that that's something that we explore, and who knows if that money is going to be available again in the future. And Billings TrailNet is prepared to give matching funds toward that, so that's another thing. So anyway, I applaud the city for putting out the grant applications, and we'll support whatever safe routes to school or trails or whatever is selected. But just to put the bug in your ear, that Yellow Jacket Trail is something that we're really hoping to get built. Thank you.
I'm one of the least technical people in the room, so Kevin's telling me we've got to do what to share the screen so that when, okay. So, oh, it's already down here. Thank you, Kevin. Let's see here. How can we show it so that it's not, so it's full kind of screen? Sorry. As Kevin's setting that up, let me just kind of set up Dave from SL Circo. So first of all, as the mayor said, so council, I'm sorry, actually, wow.
I haven't turned that.
Okay. There we go. Okay, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so as the mayor kind of kicked off with the problems of our utility conversion of 2024, council requested wisely, staff certainly agreed that it was helpful to bring in an entity to conduct an audit to understand what happened. So SL Circo, Dave Allen is here to present that audit. Before he kicks things off, I just want to kind of hit 3 key high points, turn it over to David, and then I've got just a handful of slides at the end. All of this was in the public information that was provided on Friday. So first and foremost, certainly at the time that we went go live, so to speak, when the actual conversion was going to take place from our old utility data system to our new data system, there were significant, in the industry, exceptions or problems. Those problems caused a very significant delay in utility bills, some 60 and 90 days. So first and foremost, that bad data coming into the system caused a very unanticipated set of problems for us. Secondly, good news is the meters themselves read accurately. And we had the independent third-party analysis of meters that were pulled out of homes, put on a pallet, mailed off, and that analysis was done and completed. And third, Dave is going to talk about the management, the lack of resources we had relative, most specifically, expertise in guiding a software conversion of this level of sophistication and that didn't take place. So we set the team up. They were not set up to succeed internally. We lacked that expertise, and Dave will get into details there. So those are areas that when we circle back after Dave covers the audit itself, I'll give some very specific things about what we would have done differently if we knew then what we know now, as well as the steps that we're taking moving forward to make sure that we don't have this problem again. So with that, Dave Allen and his team from SL Circo are going to cover their findings in their audit. So thank you, David.
Very good. Welcome, Dave. And council will be sure to give you an opportunity to ask your questions of Dave, but let's let him finish his presentation. Chris will have a few comments, and then we'll open it up for questions. I'll probably ask each of you to keep your questions to 1 or 2 until everybody's had a chance, and we'll circle back to make sure everybody has an opportunity. So with that, Dave, all yours.
Mayor Cole and council members, it's an honor to be here and to be able to present to you the findings from the audit. I wanted to start out just by introducing myself and making sure that you all knew my background and what brought me to this opportunity to share the information from the audit. SL Circo started back in 1968 working with different municipalities and utilities in the data, the presentment of data, and the evaluation of data that was at the time primarily laboratory data, but also working with the utilities in how they were functioning and doing some training. Over time, that work has grown into work that relates primarily with the interaction of the technology that the different municipalities work with, as well as the organization of the people, and how that technology and people process comes together has really put us in a position where we've had the opportunity in the time I've been working there, and it hasn't been since 1968. But since I've been working there, we've had over 500 utilities that we've helped do this kind of work. We have people on our team that sit on the industry standards committees, so we understand how those standards have been built, and we're working with projects where technology and people changes take place, and really have been involved across the country in the debates about the best practices of going through this process. In the last 6 months, we've had several utilities that are half the size of Billings and several that are twice the size of Billings that we've helped through this process. And generally, when we're involved in this kind of process, we're engaged for a longer period than just the evaluation. But in this case, what we really wanted to do was to evaluate the decisions that caused the billing issue that you confronted and go forward from there. So I wanted to make sure to start by establishing why the community kind of engaged our team, and it was primarily because of a history where we had worked with utilities on this kind of process in the past. I'd like to, during the presentation, walk through the scope of what we were asked to do, as well as the findings and the key observations that took place in that study, and then talk a little bit about next steps. But before I get into that, as we discuss the scope and the steps through the scope, that process of defining the scope was really one that, as we were going into it, broke into 4 different categories. And so I'd like to present to you the information that we found in each of those 4 categories. The first category was really very much a technical, tactical approach of how the billing was being calculated, and that process of making sure that the meters were accurate, and that the meter process, both from meter to billing system, went smoothly, and the meters themselves, that they were accurate. So the first of these groups was the meter accuracy. The second is the accuracy of the calculation of each of the charges within the bill. We wanted to make sure to evaluate that there wasn't a systemic issue that existed within that calculation, but that calculation was processed correctly. And then where there were issues, how those issues were addressed. We had assumed from the discussion that there would be some. The third area that we had been asked to look at revolved really around some larger issues that were brought up. And I think of this as more strategic, or the way that decisions were made within the staff team and within utility billing to take steps, as well as some of the larger components of the steps that they needed to take in order to execute those bills correctly. And then the last component was in the communication, and how communication took place from the city of Billings out to the account holders to make sure that all of the information was delivered correctly. So having outlined the 4 different components of the scope, I'd like to walk through each of those scopes and share how we executed those. And starting by the first of those items, which was meter accuracy, this was really broken into, like I said, how did data get from the meter through the different systems to the billing system. And when you think of these metering systems, One of the questions was, what is going on in the field? And as an outside firm, we like to do that kind of field step first because we're influenced least at the very beginning of that process. And we want to get out into the field, see the meter, walk through each of those systems and know from firsthand stance how that data is moving through the system. So we did that. When we walked through that process, we selected randomly out of the total accounts, 30 accounts that we would like to visit. We were going to be here for 3 days. So we figured we would get to about 10 of those accounts per visit. We ended up having a little bit larger number of accounts that we approached to see if we could get appointments to get in. So I think there was a larger data set that we actually made calls to. But in the end, we were able to get into 10 accounts per day when we were here and get to those 30 accounts. And we found that the data as it moved from the meter through the reading that is done both electronically and physically at the outside of the building into the metering system, and then from the metering system into the billing system, that the flow of that data, the accuracy was correct. The second stage of meter accuracy revolved around, did the meters record correctly? We didn't change out the meters, and we knew that the legacy system was primarily functioning correctly, so we assumed that it was very likely that the meters were going to function well and at a good standard. So we didn't go in expecting a big problem here, but we were able to get to a 95% accuracy or level of confidence by testing 46 of the meters within the system. So we randomly selected those 46 and found that none were overbilling, and I'll show you the data from that. And then the last piece, because of the way that the meters are tested, most of the meter testing or the meter registering happens in the center portion of the meter or the intermediate flow of the meter. And that intermediate flow, because it's not a perfect kind of balance between each of the flows, that intermediate flow registered very well. So the revenue that the city collected from those meters, we found to be very high. So here on this, and I don't imagine that you will necessarily see this on your screens, and maybe it doesn't show. I can see if I can get it here. So maybe if I just talk you through these 3 charts.
Nope, that's not showing up either.
That's all right. So for each of these 3 graphs, they're representing the meters that we selected. So the 46 meters show up as points on each of those graphs. And you can see on that graph, it's representing it has boxes around each of those different areas. So on the top, it's showing the minimum flow. So that is, a relatively small measure of flow below the area that the meter was designed to catch, but able to capture some of that data. And the industry, when it sells a new meter, requires the flow to be within that box. The new meters, every meter is tested by the manufacturer and delivered with a test that fits in the blue box. And what you'll see is some of the meters at that minimum flow slowed down or are under registering. There are none that are over registering in that minimum flow. If you go to the second box, that's the intermediate flow. It's the flow that the meter was designed for. 70% of the meter flows through, the water flows through that intermediate flow. You can see that almost every reading that we took shows the readings happening within the testing standards for that. And none, again, are overcharging in that group. And then on the bottom is obviously the maximum. And again, a very strong performance, just a few that are slightly low. So what we found, concluded from this, is there isn't any representation that leads us to believe that age is causing any of these slowdowns. There's zero over registration. And so just a real strong confidence in the meter registration with that. I do have a slide that walks through how we selected the meters and why we came up with the 46 meters. For us to go from the 95, the level of confidence of 95 up to 99, it would have more than doubled the cost of the testing process. So we didn't make that recommendation, didn't feel like it was necessary. And the test kind of bore that out, that it wasn't critical. The last piece on the meter accuracy, we engaged a testing firm to do, a third-party testing firm to do the testing of each of those meters. That firm was certified and well-respected in the industry, one we've worked with a number of utilities, and they were also available to do the tests in the time frame we wanted them done. So we sent them to them and found a strong result that in the end, the meters are accurate. On billing, I would like to, the accuracy of the calculations of each of the charges. I would like to start by saying again here that you really are primarily accurate. 98.4% of the billing charges came out without any error that we could calculate. And what we did was we took all of the charges that came in the bills for 2 billing cycles in the legacy system and 2 billing cycles in the new system, and ran all those through our computer model that calculated each of those processes. And where there were exceptions that didn't fall within our computer model, we kicked them out. And that is the group where we manually went through each of those registrations and made sure that they met the criteria for your calculations. And what we found is that those that were not part of that 98.4% were primarily, virtually all of them were benefiting the resident, and were only a cent or two off in their calculation. So what happened, we believe, was that the billing team really had a focus on making sure that the public was billed correctly and that they wouldn't overcharge the public. And so their calculation maintained within like the old rate or within an less expensive calculation in a spot that we might have went the other direction on. So that was the primary difference here. In this process, what we were the second piece to that process was we were to look at how decisions took place and how the actions took place within the department that was doing these calculations. And to give you a little kind of context on this, several of the larger issues that were raised to us included kind of evaluating and looking at a few of the large systems within the process, like looking at the bill prints to make sure they matched what the charges were meant to be within the system, looking at auto pay to make sure that the auto pay was done correctly. And when we did that evaluation, we found some auto-paid bills that the resident expected 100% of their payment to be paid by autopay, that autopay did a fraction of the bill payment. So instead of, if that would have happened, Mayor Cole, to you, you would have received maybe 25% of your bill pulled off, and you'd still show a bill due within that, an amount due within that. So then the follow-up bill, you would have showed a leftover portion of the bill. When we looked into that error, it was primarily a setup error, or it was only a setup error where during the setup of the system, there was a box that wasn't checked and caused that partial billing to take place. In all circumstances, as we evaluated this process, evaluated the meters, and evaluated the calculations of the bill, we approached the billing staff and asked them for explanations about questions we had. And in each occurrence, we asked them to back up their decisions with their processes, with their decision-making assumptions they went into the process, and how they kind of walked through their process, their thought process as they went into these decisions. And in all cases, we found them very professional. We found a group of people that had been there for a long time, experienced, had executed the billing in a very efficient and effective way on the legacy system. And what happened here was they moved into that newer system and just didn't have the opportunity to be able to challenge the vendor and really go forward and make the decisions they needed to. And I'll go into that a little bit further as I go into that go live process. But our big recommendation here would be just to go complete the process that I know they're already started on, of documenting those processes, documenting the goals and the performance indicators that they've started with. In the end, we found that the team worked well together and that they were really overwhelmed with the exceptions as they went into go live. So the fourth and final grouping of scope that we were asked to look at what related to communications. And this was really communications both to the customers, to the account holders, and also communication, really to leadership about how the process was going and how those steps took place. And I did find quite a few examples where there was a really strong attempt to be transparent. One that I think is important for your community to recognize is you've got a portal that provides a lot of the information about those reads and how those reads are coming through the system. And your portal has a high level of sign up by your community and account holders in that portal. In addition to that, there were social media posts, press releases, information on the phone tree, as well as information in the website and notices later on, I believe, to the council and at council meetings. Call volume was certainly an issue, and the volume of account holders that didn't understand the bill that was being delivered to them or had concerns about the bill that was coming at them called in, and the city staff didn't have the capacity to be able to handle the volume of calls coming in. And so we did some looking at those call logs to see the number of calls and the number of calls per call service agent, and felt like they certainly did a yeoman's job in trying to keep those calls from being stuck in a voicemail situation or in a situation where the resident wasn't getting the information through. But that process certainly caused a trust gap that is a big part of this whole process. There's a couple of slides I'd like to go through, but I want to start just by sharing that the meters are accurate according to our audit, that the system is calculating accurately, the new system is calculating accurately, and the real drive of the problem was an exception overload when you shifted from the legacy system to the new system. And the project staff was too lean to be in a position to handle that volume of challenges coming from the transition. So lean project staffing, complexity increases with scheduling changes. I think the initial plan was that this transfer would take place early in the year. And because of the data in the initial conversions not going as they had hoped, the delay in later conversions caused this schedule to be delayed more than once. So it went from an early in the year project to an implementation that took place late in the year at a time when your months were the warmest and there was irrigation and watering of grass and things like that taking place, as well as a rate change that took place. And all of that complexity made the process harder. The exception overload I'll go into a little bit more in a moment here, but I did want to mention that the real core value of not sending or only sending correct bills delayed the process and caused some of the larger bills, as Chris described. And in all cases, when we found inaccuracies, it was inaccuracies that favored the resident. So the charges were accurate, but that is, as we're evaluating, what we're evaluating is that systematic calculation of the bills. There certainly were circumstances where individuals, because of change of ownership or because of specific situations that they were working through, where their bill needed individual attention. And that's where, when we looked at any of the issues that we found, they were all issues that were manually created. On the go live, the context of that go live, I think that it was mentioned a few times that pulling data out of that legacy system was difficult, and hard to do. I think it was recognized by everybody as they were going in that this was going to be difficult to do. As that was happening, the vendor was making declarations, and I think there was a tendency for everybody to accept those vendor declarations. And lastly, I believe Public Works would have really gained significantly if they had IT leadership that was inert or a part of that Public Works team. The conversion process went along that blue column there. Conversion 1 took place. It was provided by the city, and the conversion didn't go well according to both the city and the vendor. There were issues about the data, and they needed to run some things again. The second conversion was done, and it still wasn't in the state that they felt like they could go forward and do the final conversion and go live. When they made all of the corrections they needed to the legacy system such that they could do the third conversion went very smoothly, both from the city and the vendor's standpoint. But at that third conversion point, all of the testing that was done by the vendor, and that vendor testing indicated that the conversion went well, and it appeared complete. It appeared that the process went expected, and the tests were done. In the days that followed that conversion and they went live, as they run each billing, they noticed billing errors surface in each of those billings. And those billing errors are represented on what in the industry we call exception lists. And those exceptions are scripts that are run against the billing to decide if it meets the criteria. Often those criteria are built on the previous year's usage or common usage for that particular group. And those billing exception lists were larger than the billing staff could handle and had expected. And so that process of going through those initial billings and their commitment to not send out erroneous bills is what caused the whole system to back up and cause the errors that exist. In the end, our key observations would be that all of the procedures that exist on the new system should be documented, and the performance indicators that the new system was purchased for should be used. Certainly, one of the questions that we asked initially was why go forward with the system change? And it was articulated by the team that they really needed the data from the new information system. And in the industry, it's not known as a billing system. It's known as a customer information system. And that information system for the Public Works Department isn't collecting just billing data. It's collecting all sorts of data related to service orders, activity in the field, and activity at the meter and with the customer. So the importance of how that collects that data and how it's logged was really a critical component. And the legacy system didn't have the ability to do nearly the job that the new system did. And so there was a high motivation to make that move to allow the Public Works group to work more effectively and efficiently. Because of that, better performance indicators are available, and I would expect that those would be created and communicated. The Public Works Department has done a good job of replacing meters every 20 years, meaning that every year, those meters that hit the 20-year mark are changed out. And what that does is keep the new meters replaced at a consistent pattern. And it is the best way to operate a utility like this. And they are doing a good job of executing that, but it's not documented. So we would like that documented so that good procedure process continues. And then the fourth item, we would really like the relationship that the municipality has with the vendors to be a trust but verify relationship. And it's a little bit like any of us have, we'd love to be able to go to our mechanic and trust them every time. But in situations where we're working with highly critical components like this, it's really important that the city is the one that owns that testing process. And so I have recommendations that really revolve around the relationship that the city has with their vendors. The next item about communication really gets into some of the way that the city is communicating with account holders. I think it's critical that we really understand what is important to account holders and make changes and actions as they see are needed. And then the last item is system training. And it gets back to that idea of a customer information system. It's not the billing staff that needs the training. That training exists in departments, even beyond Public Works. So anybody that has interaction with that customer information system really needs to understand that. So what's the path forward? The path forward is communication, performance indicators, and a strong stewardship with the vendors. And with that, I want to move to kind of the question and comment period. And Chris, I don't know if you wanted to share your slides now as well.
Thank you, Dave, and I particularly appreciate I was going to hit on, and therefore I'll keep it brief. Why did we do this in the first place? And Dave talked about ultimately asset management, and in plain simple terms, our utilities, water, sewer, solid waste, and storm are valued at several $billion. So as ratepayers are paying month in and month out, we want to make sure we're absolutely maximizing that resource that they're giving us, allowing us to make changes to changing a pipe before it starts having breaks and flooding neighborhoods, things of that nature. So that was the foundation. I think the frustration for our customers is the billing side of the prior software looked pretty good. So many have asked, why did we need to make the change? And the change really was driven by the need for more data on the backside. What would we do if we knew then what we know now? So in brief, as David said, we needed and need going forward information technology expertise employee inside of Public Works. That exists in our IT department, and they work and focus many of their hours in Public Works, but not dedicated full-time. So one of David's recommendations there, and in hindsight, we should have had that. Secondly, and frankly, as I understand, the most impactful is when getting into a software conversion of this scale and complexity, we needed a third-party expertise. Not that we would ever be able to afford or want to afford in-house, but when dealing with a project of this level of sophistication, that person should have been added, that resource to the overall budget of this project. The amount of dollars we've lost in trust and confidence in this was well worth what that investment would have done for us in going forward. Not for all software conversions. We've done conversions. We do them every year without hiccups or issues. But of this level of sophistication and complexity, and we have more in the future, we needed that, and we should have had that. Third, as was stated, the communication with our public that we were going into this, how it may affect them, and ultimately the effects of the executive level staff, so that we could have come in and inform both the council and public about some triage issues that we could have had, really go down to the end here. That needed to be improved. And fourth, the original migration was supposed to happen in February, in the winter, right now, a year ago, which frankly was ideal timed. It was planned for more than a year prior to that, because it's the winter. No bills are changing, no rates are changing, and people aren't watering their lawns. They're worrying about snowplows, not water. When that conversion slid all the way into May, in hindsight, it should have been stopped. I'm told it probably would have cost us a couple $100,000, but it may have been worth every penny. But we should have been in a position to analyze and potentially stop the conversion, punt it until the fall, so that people weren't dealing with both watering their lawns and utility rate changes at the same time. This is the area, candidly, I think most impacted our customers, because our customers are accustomed to getting a monthly bill. And when they get that monthly bill, they can respond that, wow, I've been watering my lawn a lot, I'm going to cut back, or no, I'm perfectly fine with a $400 or $500 a month bill. We took that away from them when they didn't get a bill for 60 and 90 days in the middle of summer. And last but not least, that team, once the exceptions were determined to be in the thousands, And in order to correct those exceptions, people weren't going to see bills for 60 and 90 days. We should have triaged that in such a way that, again, we could have been back in front of you saying, I realize we've adopted rate adjustments for July 1. We've adopted stormwater to come in to your utility bill July 1 versus your tax bill. I'm asking that we postpone those implementations so that that team of staff who is tirelessly working around the clock to fix these exceptions would have had fewer exceptions to deal with. So those are what, in hindsight, I wish we would have known then to have changed. What about going forward? Some of this is repeat, but important. This first slide gets pretty technical. This is the current administrative order signed, interestingly enough, 3 days into the job by my predecessor. He was here for a couple weeks while I was hired in 2018, of our IT policy in directing, kind of managing projects of this magnitude. We have a new updated draft from our IT department based on changes in the industry, all of which, frankly, talk and hit on some of these very areas that David has brought to us. Mandatory IT involvement. There was IT involvement, but it needed to be at a higher scale. But now, where the current policy says you need, please touch base with IT, there is a mandate now where appropriate. Expanding the integration and the migration guidelines really in English gets to that. At what level is a project so sophisticated that you need to bring in outside expertise to guide that project? Testing standards, training, et cetera. I won't read you the slide, but all of those are in this draft to update. We need, whether it's adjusting current resources in IT and or when we get into the FY26 budget, look at full-time IT resources inside Public Works. We need to improve those communications, as we're talked about. A not so popular topic to deal with sometime in the near future is, through all of this, we've been crystal clear for good reason. There will be no turnoffs and no late fees. And I'm not suggesting we start those tomorrow. In fact, I don't think we should start those anytime in the next upcoming weeks or several months. But at some point, we will need to go back to that in fairness to all those customers who are paying their bills. And last, but certainly not least, on the action items is that trust but verify. We need the utility bill itself that you get emailed to you or mailed in your mailbox to have all the necessary information for you to calculate for yourself that I'm being asked to pay the proper amount for garbage, water, sewer, etc. So those are all action items going forward, and then some things that are happening right now. So tomorrow morning, when calls come in, we have a call center staffed to go tomorrow morning with 6 outside resources. They've helped us through this process in the past. They are not our normal customer service people, but they will be able to help triage and give people information relative to where to find the audit, how to get into the system, log in, so you can do your own kind of self-audit and answer some of those high-level questions. Secondly, on our website, billingsmt.gov/audit results is where you can get all this information. David said we've got a really good, by industry standards, number of our customers using the online accounts. In a perfect world, we'd like them all to have access, even if they like that paper bill, just so they can go in for themselves, because they can literally see down to the hour what their water usage is. And then last here, also to sign up for water notifications. The system tells you when there's some kind of a spike or peak use. So with that, it kind of closes out our slides. David and I here to answer your questions, provide more information, and ultimately move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Dave, Mackenzie, everybody at SL or Circle for your services over the past number of months. Councilor, we want to give you an opportunity to ask your questions, and then also members of the public to comment as well. But since there may be a lot of questions, we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. Why don't we just ask each council member to ask a question or two? And if Councilman Shaw, if you don't mind kicking us off, we'll just start down here. And then we'll come back. So don't feel like you've got to get all your questions now, but to spread the fun around a little bit, why don't we try to just keep it to a question or two? And obviously you may have a follow-up there, but Councilmember Bashak.
Thank you. I have, can everybody hear me? Okay. I have more of a comment, but also would like some verification if I'm explaining this correctly, because I think our job partially is going to be, we have to explain this to the people that call us and are wondering, you know, how this all works. So is it accurate to say the meters are accurate, your bills were accurate, the problem came because of this exception issue, and it delayed a lot of people's bills during a very high water use time in the summer? Going forward internally, the city has identified a number of things that we could do differently and will do differently next time. So we've learned a lot from this process, but there was no great failure in terms of the mechanics, the billing. It was a issue of converting a software conversion that kicked out all these exceptions. Is that an accurate way to explain your findings?
Yeah, I think that's primarily accurate. There were a small number of manually created errors that were corrected. And I don't want to diminish those individuals' experience to say that everything was perfect. On example, there was a small number that received a refund because the proration unfairly treated them, and those have all been paid correctly back, and were identified by the utility or the city prior to us having looked at that data. When we did see the data in the form that it was originally sent, because we looked at each of those billings, and when we challenged the city, they had already corrected that. So I don't want to underplay the experience that people have had, but the system itself is calculating correctly. And so going to the portal is a good way to really see how that charge is taking place.
Thank you. And I think adding all that to the bills too will help, of people being able to do that self-auditing,
Absolutely,
looking at their usage. So I also don't want to diminish what the experience, same thing happened to all of us of,
Yeah.
oh, my water bill's so high, what's going on? But just to be able to accurately explain and make sure we're all on the same page explaining to the public.
absolutely.
So it's very clear, because I think that's the only way we're going to rebuild trust. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you very much. And just to follow up on that, members of the public who might be listening, because it may be difficult to get information still from the department or from the call center, remember, you always have a city council member, and we encourage you to start with your inquiries to the city council members. They're not experts, but they've sat through a lot of this, and they will be able to direct you hopefully where to go, or if they can't answer your question, there's a good chance they will be able to answer your question. So you can always get your city council members' email address on the city's website, and often phone numbers as well. Or we go to Councilmember Gulick. Chris, you had something you wanted to add there.
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to provide some numbers to the context, because I think it's important, as it was said, that there was a group of cycle 2, it's about 8,100 customers where a human error was done and their bills were estimated in the middle of all of this. Those estimates didn't affect 5,400 of those, but a little over 2,153 were overcharged. And it had to do with the fact that the bills were 60 and 90, they were pulling in data for 60 and 90 days. And we have a tiered rate structure where you pay more the more water you use. Well, that system created some overcharges. Those overcharges, on average, maybe the disappointment here, I don't want to, is the median adjustment was $7. However, the largest adjustment was $594.75. And the average adjustment was just over $20. So those customers, as Dave said, that was found by staff, calculations after those bills went out. made those corrections, and those credits happened on people's December bills. So again, as you asked the question, the system is calculating accurately, but there was a place where literally a few thousand bills went out. They were higher than they should have been, and that needed to be rectified and has been rectified. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Gulick?
One of the recommendations that came out was, was one of the reasons that we had some of the issues that was identified was we have lean staffing. And I think that's something that we want to have efficiency in our staffing, and we like that idea, and it keeps our rates lower, but it means you don't have capacity when the unexpected happens. In terms of the suggestions, the recommendations for the additional IT staff and the third party, does that address that issue of lean staffing for utility work? And then I guess the follow-up would be, the city consists a lot more than just the utility, and so what are our thoughts in that regard as well?
So my first brief, and then I'll let David add to it. So first, as is recommended, and when we get into this budget cycle, I think we need to get into the depths of that. Is that a shift in resource? Is it an additional resource? One of those components, having more IT, information technology capacity inside the department to have helped all the way through this process as well as into the future, right? We have multiple vendors that touch bills every month. This is not just a one and done, as well as technology and data we use to make better decisions. So Dave can let you know what happens more industry there. The second piece and the more impactful piece to this project, I think bottom line, will add to future project budgets. Again, not all software conversions necessitate a third-party entity representing us in this way, but this one did. That's not a resource we would, as I understand it, would ever do enough of that it would be an in-house, but that could have and should have been added to our budget and our overall costs, because look what we couldn't have afforded to save that in hindsight.
And the only reaction I have would be, council member, that what has been experienced was uncomfortable for the account holders in Billings, but certainly not unusual. You know, as you take and transfer a customer information system from a legacy system to a new system, it is common that this kind of trip up happens. So I don't think that it always feels good to know that you're more common than not in that case, but the reality is you do have a good team. And if I was to build my own city, which I'm not in your chair, I would staff lean. Having said that, I would also have the ability to pull in outside resources to have the data kind of capability to be able to notice when you're in kind of that troubled state. And that's the piece that I don't think you were prepared to. But I think you have a team that's highly professional. They work together really well, both in the office and out in the field. And so we didn't experience an incapable team. What we experienced was a very lean team, really faced with a situation where they were challenged and they couldn't handle the volume that they had to run into.
Thank you, Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Dave, and just a real quick question for you on one, and then I have a couple other, maybe for Chris. This is the second time I've been through the presentation, so I've got some other questions, but I'm going to just ask you this one because I kind of asked you the first meeting we had is, can you provide some information on the reason that you found for the lack of communication between staff and administration? Before you answer that, I just want to say that I think from what I get from this site so far is that, the city didn't have the expert project team there. Because of that, we weren't able to prepare for all those contingencies that may arise, or someone who's been through something like this. And then you also identified our communication wasn't very good. There were some good things about it, but there's also some things that didn't work well, which caused that cascading impact that really kind of caused a catastrophic failure on that. And then you mentioned some things about the vendor selling some things, and the communication or the verification process may not have been there. But specifically, can you just kind of explain what you found as far as any kind of reason for lack of communication between staff and administration, so that some of these things Chris mentioned in hindsight could have been taken care of?
Yeah, I think that it is really common for historically for us to think of these systems as not carrying as much punch and value as they do going forward. So historically, you think about things that are lower tech, have less kind of moving parts as being something our team could handle. And this kind of has, escalated to the point that this is a much bigger project than it would have been, 20 years ago or 50 years ago. So any of us that are building off the experience that we had even 5 years ago, it isn't the same customer information replacement system as what we had before. So these systems, really the amount of data that these systems have at their fingertips and have to be able to process at an expectation that's very quick is really accelerated. And because of that, I think that vendors don't understand how much they're impacting us. And so I think the vendor didn't suggest that there was an outside representative representing the city. An implementer is how the industry looks at it. And because I think the expectation was that this was really a turnkey from the vendor, it caused this situation. And I don't think it was the vendor trying to be malicious or the staff not, really having that as their background. It was more that, the technology has moved so quickly that it's really gotten to the point that it's very difficult to do this with your kind of in-house staff, where it wasn't all that difficult. Certainly at the beginning of my career, there were a lot of groups, with a much less sophisticated team than you had in Billings coming into this. But the amount of data and the impact of that data has grown so much. I think that's why you were in the condition that you're.
Do you know if the vendors, if this was a new software for the vendor and we were one of the first rolling this particular software out, or was this something that they had actually rolled out many months, lots of different cities?
This software is really well known and has been rolled out many times. That doesn't diminish the need for an external group and the impact of the fact that the vendor isn't looking out necessarily for how the city implements it. They're looking at to make sure that their product performs the way they pitch. So I think it's really critical when we think about these processes that we go back to that trust but verify position more and more as we're dealing with these bigger pieces of data. And the piece that we're all concerned about is security, right? I want not to believe that somebody that has my data based on something that is implied or stated that it's secure. I want to know that it's secure by proof. And that kind of requirement of verification in each piece, that didn't exist just a few years ago. And so that need for the data and how that data is processed, I think has gotten much more complex.
Okay, thank you. And Mayor, I have a question for Chris, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Chris, you mentioned several different action items, and I believe actually during the earlier meeting, David had mentioned that. Actually, I'm going to ask the question that Councilmember Kennedy asked was, how do we go about rebuilding trust to the community? And David's answer was to give them tools so they can verify themselves. And so I noticed in your action items, that is listed, but it's listed number 5 in the list of the 5 action items. When will these tools, these detailed utility bills, so people can actually calculate their own billing, be given to the public so they can actually do it and have a trust in our system going forward?
Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council, I believe we are still several months away. I'm being told that we can get there, will get there through this winter and early into spring. March, if you look at the calendaring of the cycles, March is when everybody ends up back on a 30-day cycle. I say that though cautiously because as we've dealt with exceptions, we've been trying to get on that 30-day cycle, so I don't want to overpromise. But that is not fifth because it's fifth. It's the last of the priorities. But to your point, it is critical. But it isn't first because they've had to correct and deal with the exceptions to make sure that of the accuracy. So it is a priority. It's a priority for the team. I believe it's a priority to every one of you because we see it on the customer side that the calls you get, I get, are people not being able to verify for themselves why was mine, particularly it's been solid waste of all things. The solid waste fee of $14 and some cents. For years, they could look back and they would see it was to the penny every month, the same amount. But the last 6 months, the number has changed. If they do the math, they've not been overcharged anything, but it's frustrating and confusing. Why is it $12 and change? Why is it $15 and change? Those verifications need to be made as soon as possible. I'm under the understanding that that can happen in the next few months, 2 or 3 months.
Okay, so Mary, quick follow-up on that.
And then let's move on.
So Chris, just to be clarified, because I thought we were going on 30-day cycles sometime in December. So we're not on 30-day cycles yet for the residents. And when will that actually be on 30 days? I hear you say March?
I'm getting it over my head already. Some pieces of it are on that 30-day cycle. So it gets into, I think, the difference, and maybe David or somebody in the department can help because you have been seeing billing periods. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, what's the term I'm looking for? Your service period. You'll see that service period is right in that 30-day window. The complication has been the solid waste component has not matched that 30-day window every time.
Okay.
So that consistency, people aren't getting bills 45 days later, 60 days later, 90 days. That's been fixed. But all components of the bill aren't that precise 30-day window.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you, Mayor. Dave, I have just a couple questions for you. As you're coming up here, I just want to say thank you for your hard work. The city administrator had asked myself and Councilmember Upsis to be part of sort of the audit oversight team. So you and I have had a lot of conversations. You've been very patient with me, but most importantly, you've been really candid with me as I've asked a lot of questions. And so I'm going to ask a couple of things that you and I've talked about, and I want you to tell me if you still agree with them,
Okay.
or if your recommendations have changed. Because I think we might have muddled things a little bit today. And so I'm just going to clarify, and you can tell me if I'm wrong or if you still think this is accurate. But I believe there are 3 key takeaways from your finding tonight. The first is the meters aren't the issue. And they were never the issue, right? We did not do a citywide meter swap out as a part of this software conversion. So people might have meter issues, but they're ordinary O&M meter issues. Meters are not the challenge here.
You got it. That is correct.
The second takeaway is that there absolutely were incorrect bills that went out. There were about 2,000 that went out. Staff caught it, they corrected it, and they issued the refunds. When you looked at every account in the system, you did not identify any place where they'd missed an error or places where it appeared the error continued.
Correct.
And the third is there was unacceptable levels of project management here. And that resulted in a couple of things. It resulted in people who didn't have either the expertise or the authority to make decisions who were making decisions. It resulted in poor internal communications, things not getting kicked up the chain soon enough. And it resulted in poor external communications, which caused a tremendous amount of customer frustration. And one of those communication, decision-making, project management consequences was the recommendation to do all three changes at once: the software conversion, the rate increase, and the transfer of stormwater, which you had told me, and I'm just going to ask if it's still your belief, that if we'd had staff with the appropriate expertise, the external implementer, that recommendation never would have been made, that would have been a too high risk of a project. So are those still am I still on track with you?
You are. I think on the last one, it's more complex than that. It's not that I would have not done it, but it would have come to the council. So you would have made the decision if you were going to go forward with that rate change or not. That's what, as an implementer, I wouldn't have let that go through without a larger decision being made.
So I think, in fairness, the issue was presented to us early in the project. We think we're going to go forward in this way, and maybe the risks of that weren't properly analyzed or understood.
Right.
But then also, at some point when we started having backups, there might have needed to be another decision in there.
You got it.
Okay. And the reason, Council, that I'm sort of trying to I'm not done, Dave. The reason I'm sort of trying to succinctly capture that is, I circulated to you all a resolution that I'm going to talk about a little bit later tonight. I've talked about with the city administrator to really help create not just permission, but expectation that decisions are brought up the chain faster and earlier. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we were still tracking. Mm-hmm. The last thing I want to pick up with you tonight is this issue that we kind of talked about a little bit at the end, but I think we need to get into a little bit more, particularly when we're talking about what Councilmember Neese and Chris just discussed, which is this issue of staff training. You had told me at one point that there is significantly more capacity in the software than we are currently using, that there are maybe some features that are turned off or not being used, and that in fact some of the things that the city administrator is talking about in terms of getting service periods displayed or more data to customers are in the system, but that we just haven't trained staff to do it. Is that still the case?
I don't think it's there were two conversations related to that. So I think you're hitting on an important issue, and I don't want to shortchange it. One is that I think staff knows that the reason they moved to this new system was they wanted the use of the tracking and the ability to execute that the new system had that the old one did not. So it's not a lack of knowledge or not being exposed to it or not being kind of trained, but that the process of getting that system going, it takes time to set it up and takes proper setup. It appeared to me there was features that exist for like field teams and things like that that are going to require training and knowledge. And I don't believe that they've gotten there yet, that it will take some additional training.
And so when we hear like maybe 60 or 90 days to get there, does that seem consistent with your?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And when the complexity of getting everything into the right point, and getting through that training, through the knowledge, through the steps, and even once they make that decision, you have to move those processes over time. It doesn't happen overnight. So as much as I would like to, for both you and your account holders and for the staff team, say you could do it tomorrow, it wouldn't be productive. As an implementer, I wouldn't recommend it.
So Mayor, this is my last follow-up. Could we have trained staff ahead of time, or is this sort of, does the software have to be live to begin the training process? Could we have anticipated this need differently, or does it inherently have to come after we're already live?
There are pieces of it that couldn't be done until you implement. So even the best of systems implement and have kind of 2.0, 3.0 kind of releases of the system. Having said that, there absolutely would have been testing processes and steps that would have allowed the team to be in a stronger position when you went live. And it would have given the team the ability to verify the expectations of the system.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Rogers.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, just a couple of real quick questions. We're talking about the transparency with your the number of registrations we have on the portal, 17,882. How many total customers were impacted by this?
We have north of 40,000 customers.
Yeah. Every customer had a long bill, so every one of them would have been impacted by that. And that's where I certainly encourage as many as are willing to get on the portal and use that as a resource. I don't want to deliver that message, because that really is one of the ways that the account holders can verify the process themselves.
I guess there are a lot of people that I know that are not necessarily technology savvy, that don't want to have to register on the portal, and they're just not going to do it. And so I just wondered, I don't remember seeing anything that came out in hard copy bills. I know that we had advertisements in the paper, social media, press releases, et cetera, but that seems fairly reactive rather than proactive. If we could have maybe sent something out in a hard copy, this is a known problem, we're working on it. Is that a possibility, or does it not really work that way with the software?
It is, because for those who get that hard paper bill, there are often inserts into it, as well as there's a small box where there's a description. The key is, candidly, to have that material be so simple and clear that people take the time to read it. But yes, you are correct. There are customers who aren't going to gravitate to the online piece, and that's really our tool, as well as traditional media. They're more interested in reading what's in a print than social media. So we have to attack most everything in Billings, recognizing we've got populations on both extremes and a lot in the middle.
Good, thank you. And Dave, just a question for you. And on the last one, by long bill, you don't mean a physical long bill, but something that's beyond the traditional 30-day period, right?
Yeah, there's a window that's acceptable within the industry of a few days before and after that 30-day period that would be considered a traditional bill. Okay. Anything that's outside that window would be considered long if it's more days than that, and short if it's less.
So I'm going to stay here. I'm going to first ask something that originated with Councilmember Deputy Mayor Boyette. He probably wants to ask, but I'm going to steal it from him. He suggested this morning that you come back. Do you think that's a good idea? You're making suggestions for systemic procedure changes. If so, about when would that make sense?
I think it would make sense for facilitation of the process, and the timeline of that depends on what portion assistance is needed. But I think from my perspective, a quarterly evaluation for a period until the system gets up and running makes sense to me. Having said that, I think it is best if your auditor isn't pitching you for coming back for their work, but is brutally honest. And so I want to tell you, it is out of a love for Billings and a want for you to be stronger that I have not once tried to pitch my services. And I'm happy to come back, but I would prefer that be talked about after the audit is delivered.
Appreciate that. So just a little background, and we'll continue down. The overload, the exception overload,
yep,
was a big part of this. It's what triggered the delays that created this avalanche effect. In more or less layman's terms, can you explain if there were the primary cause of those exceptions? Was there a lion's share that was attributable to certain events or nature of the data in this conversion between the legacy old system and the new system?
Yeah, I think the legacy and it was part of the scope that Councilmember Owens and Tom, Councilmember, had asked of us, and it was to compare the legacy system data with the current system data. The way we did that was we took the date from that bill and the reading from that bill, because any big change in either of those would affect the outcome of the bill. And we did a mechanical evaluation in the legacy system and the new system of everything. And that's how we initially saw that a huge number, like almost 100% of yours had a correct match. But there was also a large number of them that did not have a correct match. And what that indicated to us was that something had happened where there wasn't the match. And so we started looking at that. And in those cases, those were the ones where the utility likely went in and corrected that. They saw the issue. And then so we took those and went to the city, and the city responded that, yes, those were ones that were exceptions, and we had made a correction.
Okay. Dates didn't match up. Councilmember Brassmiller?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Dave, I got one question for you, and it's what we talked. Yeah, it's what we talked about earlier today when you were presenting. I think you did a good job of talking about some of the failures, and Councilwoman Owen did a good job of surmising some of the things that maybe were not as poignant in the presentation necessarily as where some of these failures came. I want to pivot a little bit to now we are where we are.
Yeah.
And we have this platform that we paid over 7 figures for. Are we using that to its full capacity currently? And if we're not, what are we not using to its full capacity? And what can we use within this system that's supposed to be fairly robust to help provide information to the ratepayer?
Yeah, and our company, we have 25, not that you care, but we and our team have 25 professionals doing this kind of work across the country. And so as I'm interacting with them, there are systems I use to manage our time and manage our impact to make sure we're coordinated. Those systems we use, I don't say to those systems, is every feature of each of those systems used completely? I say, is it used completely for my situation? And so I'm a little hesitant to even suggest that you should take everything that this vendor has provided and say it works for Billings. I don't think it does. And I really need to rely on the professional team that you have to help me dictate what those are. What I have heard is that there is service order processes that could improve based on the system that you have. There are billing processes that could improve. There are customer tracking processes to make sure that we're interacting with the customers better that could improve. I certainly could do an evaluation of the implementation of this process for the city of Billings, but I didn't. And that's why I've been hesitant to be very direct with you. It's not out of a lack of appreciation. I think you're asking the right question. But I'm hesitant to put myself in front of the team that you have. What I can do is, certainly quiz and lead them down how other utilities have walked through that path and made that evaluation. And what that, in my mind, entails is not just looking at this one system, but looking how this one system plays into probably, 40 of the systems that Chris and his staff use to accomplish public works work. And that integration of those systems can't happen by the current team that's there. You need an IT professional that interacts with data and maximizes that data. So my recommendation to Billings is get an IT public works professional that can help that process. If you don't want to spend the money on that, I know a firm that can do a great job for you, but he's not going to pitch you until another day.
Go
ahead.
And this isn't a question. This is just a general comment going through this. when we started this and when we hired SL Circo, the one thing that I had asked of the community was to come at this with some patience and some grace, because this is not comfortable for anybody. Certainly not comfortable for the public works staff who, on their best day, are never noticed by our community, ever. Accountants and engineers don't want to be recognized. Their best days are when nobody knows that they did a good job. So this has been incredibly challenging. And I think one of the things that has come out of this is that there's nothing nefarious that's happened. There's no shucking and jiving that occurred to try to swindle money anywhere. There certainly have been things that we messed up. And Chris and I have talked a lot about extreme accountability in this as a first step to rebuild trust with our community. And I think this audit was our first step at extreme accountability. Now, we have to, as council, make sure that we're following through on these implementations. I'm going to be a big proponent of the initiative that Councilwoman Owen is bringing forward, because I think that ensures that we learn our lesson from the pain that we've inflicted, and we don't do that again in other systems, particularly around the justice system, which is a time bomb that's coming. But our staff has done everything that they can. We did not give them the tools to succeed. And that, in part, was, Chris has said it, it was his responsibility, and it was where he failed. It, as council, was in part our responsibility because we didn't know what we didn't know, and we went along without asking the hard questions at the appropriate times, and that's a lesson learned for us. But I think it also is a good indicator to our staff and our executive team that you do have very engaged and highly trained people sitting on this council that do want to be more involved, that have asked to be more involved and more engaged and have not. And I implore our staff, please lean into that. Don't be afraid of it. Lean into it and let us help and leverage what we can bring to the table at the same time that we're relying on your professional expertise. I think too often that gets confused or misconstrued, that we're trying to be engaged and involved in the operations side of it. That I think is a misconception. I think most of us want to help. We want you to be successful so our community is successful. And we have got to do a better job of leaning in together on those things across all of these issues, not just on public works. This is just the issue of today. I have a high confidence and belief in our staff at Public Works. I mean, Debbie has done exactly what we have asked her to do, which is make sure that as many dollars as we can make it in the ground. Not on staff, not on reports, not on soft cost stuff, but they make it in the ground so that we are fixing our infrastructure to the best of our ability. I think she's done exactly that. We have found ourselves in a situation where in running lean, we couldn't handle a problem. And that's unfortunate, but I don't think that the answer for this community then is to swing the pendulum the other way and look at a severe expansion of FTE. I don't think that's going to fix the problem. And I don't think that that is the preventative measure to prevent us from ever failing again. I think the takeaway here from my perspective is not adding more people, but training our people and investing in our people and leveraging the full extent of the resources that we have, both in our professional staff and in our elected officials, to make sure that we're trying to see this from every angle. And we don't do a good job of that as a community and as a city. And we've got to be better, because would this have been 100% preventable? Maybe not. But would we have at least had the conversations to try to prevent some of the impact of this? I would hope so, but we've got to try, and we've got to try to be better about that. And so my takeaway here is I appreciate the situation. I mean, I got my butt handed to me by my wife this morning watching the news about our bill, and how can you possibly tell me that our bill is actually accurate? I mean, how can I possibly tell you that it's not? I don't have any data, and you don't have any data to tell me. That didn't go over real well, as one can imagine. But coming at this with continued grace as we work through these things, and we've got a bigger problem now with a bunch of people that have not paid a big portion of their bill because they thought that this audit was going to be like Christmas all over again. It's going to be like an early tax rebate, and it's not. And so how we continue to handle that with grace, both from the customer standpoint to our staff and from our staff to the customers over the next 30 to 45 days is also going to be a measure of how successful we are as a community. And we got to come at that with grace for each other as we deal with those things, because it's not going to be comfortable conversations. So I appreciate, Dave, I appreciate your team's efforts. Debbie, I appreciate your team's efforts in going through a tough time. And we're going to come out of this for the better, but we've got changes to make.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Dave, just a couple of questions. One is, you kept talking about exceptions. Is there the run-of-the-mill average exception? You don't have 10,000 exceptions. You may have 2 or 3 exceptions that show up in each one of the cases. Is there some exception that's, you say, oh, this is the normal exception that we found?
I believe the exception that overloaded them related to the date and the read in the old system not matching the new one. And the concern was that it could be an overlapping bill.
So during this process, one of the things I found is that the date is a little tiny figure up in the right-hand corner. And I would try to talk to a person on the phone and say, well, look in the top right-hand corner, see a little date. Okay. How much trouble is it? Have you found any trouble between our people and the people printing this out, that they can talk to each other and that we can say, we need to make this bigger, and that company or whoever would say, oh, okay, I'll fix that. You see any relation not working together or working together?
Yeah, I saw evidence, because that circumstance of getting those bill prints and being able to evaluate them was something that we were called to do. And I needed to interact with your team in order to get that. I saw, compared to my work across the industry, I thought you had a much more professional and direct relationship on those. And my requests, direct requests to your team, was responded to in a way that I thought was very active. Having said that, it's never easy. That process of creating the bill from a third party isn't an easy process. And that's where part of intentionally I have not gotten into those systems, because I wanted to keep a distance. I always requested that information from the team, and I haven't walked through the process of why Chris and his team can't do that today. But what I can say is, every time I requested additional information, I got a professional response. And I got an indication that there was a communication between the team and those vendors that you're using. That process of bill printing is not easy. And the change from that, in that bill print process, in order for it to work correctly, has to be tested. And it isn't a simple process. So I suspect that part of the implementation drag that that has been asked by some of your fellow council members, that in order to implement all of the features that exist on this new process, it's going to take some time to work through that bill print process.
Go ahead.
Then one other thing, at the beginning, you stated that you work for many other cities.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Are they having the same issues we've had?
Very similar, not exactly the same. We work in the state of Ohio. We're working for both Toledo and Akron, and both of them More than once, I've had like the city administrator, the mayor of one talk about the other, and it puts us into a funny position. But basically, everybody has to wrestle with this decision about how they're interacting with their vendors. Do you trust them wholeheartedly, or do you bring the knowledge internally to execute? And in the end, I think the outcome is all of them are seeing that it's their personal responsibility as a steward of this system, that they have to be much more knowledgeable than they expected to have to be.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Just as mentioned, Jennifer and I had hours to pitch questions, so I'm not going to put any more questions out here. But I do want to thank you, Dave, and your team, as well as Debbie, Jennifer, your team, for working through this with all diligence and doing as much as we can to get the public's trust back, and Chris as well. Everybody's been willing to step up and talk openly and honestly about some pretty tough decisions that were made and circumstances, and I appreciate everybody's willingness to do that. It could have gone very differently if the culture hadn't been set correctly. So, Chris, thank you for that specifically. And with that, I'll let us go on.
Thank you, Councilmember. Council, we've got members of the public who've been here sitting for almost 2 hours. And so, although we may still have additional questions, and I don't want to shut you down completely, I'm going to open it for public comment. And then after public comment is closed, if you've got additional questions or comment, we'll come back. But that way we'll give public a chance to be heard, and they can leave if they would like to. So with that, we'll open up for public comment at this time. Couple instructions. One, we just ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes and tell us your name and your address. You'll see the little timer up there. You'll hear 2 little obnoxious beeps that'll remind you when that 3 minutes is up. I would also just encourage members of the public, you may have specific questions, understandably, about your own bill. And of course, that's fine. We're not going to be able in this context to go into your specifics of your particular situation. However, staff is here, and if you give us your name and your address, we can follow up. And my request would be to staff to do exactly that, and then report back to council what additional information staff might have gleaned. In doing that, there's always this question about whether we can make your situation public. You come here, you tell us it's a public problem. My default would be, or should say, that we reserve the right to maybe respond publicly to your situation unless you ask that we keep it private. If you want us to do that, of course, please either say that now or tell us after the fact. But just realize there's some, I don't want to call it risk, but reality that if you give us the details of your account, that might become public. So with that, though, please, and I guess we want to use that north lectern, the one to my left, for public comment. So again, please come forward, maybe make a little line there so I know who else would like to speak, and just ask that you give us your name, address, and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Thank you. And thank you for your patience for being here thus far.
Hello, my name is Thomas Stachef. I live at 4168 Bruce Avenue. You could have saved yourself a lot of trouble if you'd sent out 2 bills instead of combining them. That way we could have seen how much water we used in July and how much in August. And we'd have had a better idea of what the total meant. Also, the monthly usage in KGAL's chart on the new format, I can't make head nor tails of that bar chart. The old format was easy to read and understand. You could have built in to that old format the rate increase, and everybody could have seen when it came in and what it was and how much it increased their bill. I'm a plumbing contractor, and I've had a very good relationship with the Public Utilities Department, and I really like our city manager. I've had quite a few interactions with him, and they've all been very satisfactory. And I think his ownership of this situation tonight was honest and appropriate. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Holly Harbison, and I actually don't reside in Billings. I'm here representing 3 mobile home communities in the city of Billings. Is that better? I'm here representing 3 manufactured housing communities in the city of Billings. Our corporate office has been working diligently to try to get in contact regarding overbills and duplicated payments that have been received by the city from at least 2, if not 3 of our communities in the tens of thousands of dollars. What we're experiencing are I can attest to a couple of statements that were communicated this evening via the slides. We believe that payments were taken out of our accounts for our communities, both ACH or auto withdrawals, with no explanation of payments given, and then also manually billed to our properties, equating to a secondary payment being made by our accounting team, not realizing that an ACH payment was also obtained. This has been happening regularly since November, when we started noticing, probably in October to be realistic, is when the bill started kind of changing for us. Another major factor that we discussed this evening was the bills there's no information on them. So our accounting team is getting blank bills. We have no idea how to bill back our residents for that, or if it's a bill back equation. It's very difficult. The last thing I'd like to say is we have spent a lot of time invested in trying to communicate both email, phone calls, in person, and we have had 0 resolution. It's frustrating because our corporate offices are based out of Utah. I flew in specifically for this meeting today so that I could better understand what is happening here. But the realization is that we're tens of thousands of dollars making double payments at this point. And so we're a little bit different. We're not seeing the bills expecting a $7 reimbursement. Our bills are more sizable, and it's an overpayment because of duplicate withdrawals. And I don't know if that's, just listening to the statements this evening, I don't know if that's because it came out of 2 different systems, meaning the legacy system and the Go Life system maybe. I can't really equate that, but we would really like to speak with somebody. We'd love to get in communication and have the ability to sit down and show you what we found for our 3 communities in the city.
Very good. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you so much for your time.
For that heads up, and Chris will be in contact, but maybe you could make sure he's got your contact
Yeah,
information.
I'd be happy to.
before
Can I
you leave.
step over there? Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Other public comment?
Hello, my name's Anthony Rowie. I live at 2115 Vesca Way. I've stood before this body on this very subject, and nobody seems to understand. I don't trust this new system because I have 2 bills. I didn't print them up and bring them here tonight. I have a bill from June 2024. I guess that would be the legacy system. Says I used 26,000 gallons. I have a bill, my double bill, the July-August bill, that says for June 2024, I used 43,000 gallons. That's why I don't trust the new system. I've been trying to put this forward to everybody. I quit speaking, I just don't understand how, and everybody's like, you got to look at the dates. You got to look at the dates. No, I'm looking at the meter readings. Meter readings don't, apparently, according to the city council, the city administrator here, the meters don't lie. And the meters have never been a problem. I've never thought that the meters were the problem. The software is the problem. But anyway, I have a novel idea. One is, why doesn't the city eat everybody's July-August bill? That would gain some trust back, I think. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other public comment? Is there any other public comment? Before I close the public comment period, is there any other public comment? No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment. Thank you very much. Council, back to you for any further questions before we go on to item 2. Councilmember Shaw?
I just wanted to echo what a few people said, that I'm really impressed by the auditing team. Thank you for coming here. I feel like this was very thorough, addressed the scope that was given to you. It's a great first step for us in rebuilding some trust with our community. But I also want to echo what some people have said. Thank you to the public works staff. I know this has been a really difficult, challenging time, but you guys have done a really good job. And I do want our community to know and hear that we have really professional, great people working on this every single day. We have a city administrator that's willing to stand up and take responsibility for this. When we talk about accountability, to me, those are just core bedrock things that I think we're doing right. And I don't want that to get lost in this discussion. So because I went first and asked questions, I just wanted to add that at the end here. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Councilor Aspliner and Councilor Rowan?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I know Dave's not gonna say it, and I appreciate the professionalism in the way that he has separated the task that he was hired to do and the further conversations which are going to come from this. I would encourage us to have an honest conversation about continuing that relationship with SL Circo. If at the very least it's a quarterly update to make sure that we are tracking properly, but I'm even more interested in expanding that scope of work to look at the dashboard of things that could be done versus the dashboard of things that are done and what should be done. And how do we fully maximize and leverage the system on the billing side for what the public can see? I think our team has a really good understanding of the reason that they did this and the data on the back end to facilitate, how we're managing our assets. But I think we still have a blind spot about the data that we can use and the data that we should be providing to the user. And I think there's some value in continuing that conversation for whatever duration that needs to be, to just continue to make sure that we are doing everything we can to get information and correct and accurate information out to the public and to the ratepayer. So I hope that's a continued conversation that we have. I would certainly support furthering that conversation and amending that contract to continue forward.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rowan?
Thank you, Mayor. So in the sort of vein of next steps, I think I have heard, at least anecdotally, I'm sure some of you have as well, that there are ratepayers who have sort of been waiting to see what happens before they call in to have their bills evaluated. So Chris, maybe we can just go through again briefly what ratepayers who might still have questions about their bills should do. But I just want to echo something the mayor said earlier that I really believe. Council asked for this audit with, I think, the supportive staff who by all accounts engage very openly and candidly with the audit team, which is tremendous. But council asked for this audit. So I think for folks who are listening tonight and might feel like something was missed or the scope wasn't broad enough or tough questions, bring those to us. Please let us answer the questions about the audit. But for those ratepayers, Chris, who do want to now say, hey, I still have a question about my bill, or I have this meter reading issue. We know there were data quality issues between the legacy system and the new system. So maybe that is a scenario that other people are looking at where the data just doesn't comport. What are the next steps for ratepayers who would like a conversation about their bill?
Thank you, Councilmember Owen. I'm going to need some help from Public Works because I believe I know kind of the track here, but I'm going to need Debbie to kind of define how people
phone
access
numbers,
the
emails,
the phone number to access the call center, which kicks off tomorrow morning.
Is that your comment? Okay. So yes, tomorrow morning at 8, we have a call center that is set up. We did want to talk about this a little bit. It will be staffed by temps. We have 3 customer service reps. that answer the phones at any one time. During this process, we did not do a good job of regular business. We didn't get houses turned on in time. We didn't get water swapped from account to account. We didn't get hydrant meters out because we just didn't have people. So we need to keep those 3 people doing the job of business. And so we are going to have 6 temps that are working in a call center. We have created as many guidelines as we can. How do I look at my own bill? How do I audit my own bill? How do I audit my meter? How do I get on the portal? We, Andy and Gavin and I have actually been working on that all day. And so what we want to do is provide as much information as we can to people to be able to do that themselves, because we just won't be able to have 15,000 conversations. At that time, if you go through all that and you find a mistake, then we have something set up. We'll have an email set up that you can email us or call us, and we'll go through that. So we're trying, we don't know what the response is going to be. We don't know how many calls we're going to get, but we do know last time we weren't ready. And so this time we do have 6 people ready, and I think we've got some good tools, and we're going to try our best to go that direction.
And the call number or the phone number, Debbie, is it your regular number?
It is 8315 and then hit 0, and you'll go to that group, and they'll be able to guide you to different tools.
And the prefix is 657?
657.
And Mayor.
657-8315.
That's right.
657-8315.
And the email?
And email.
It is audit@billingsmt.gov.
And there's a website?
I'm sorry, it was on that last slide. Let me pull it up.
And while Chris is looking for that again, the email address is audit@billingsmt.gov.
Yes, and we have separate people manning that.
Billingsmt.gov. Thank you. And the website, www, I bet you it starts with kind of.
Billingsmt.gov/audit results will take them straight to the audit results.
So if you just Google City of Billings audit results, it should find its way to you.
Yep.
And Debbie, before you step away, Mayor, if I could, you actually brought up a really good point that I think maybe needed to get stressed a little bit louder, is that while there was this effort to respond to the challenges, there were other things that slipped. And so there have been some concerns that have ferreted up that have gotten mixed into the software conversion. So for example, houses where bills didn't get switched over fast enough. I think there were a few folks in Ward 2 who are Heights Water District customers who got city bills, but that was a function that had nothing to do with the software conversion and everything to do with the type of thing that just happens when maybe accounts don't get transferred fast enough. Is that anything you want to elaborate on?
Councilmember Owen, I think you stated it really well. When we were trying to accommodate the big load of calls and concerns, we weren't able to do some of those transfers. Some of the bill setups weren't done with as much attention to detail as they should have. I think it just comes with the sheer amount of work. And that, again, is why we want to take those 3 people offline and just make sure that we're doing the business of what we do well.
Well, thank you to you and your staff, to the new temps who've been brought into an unenviable challenge. We appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for clearing a few of those things up.
Very good. Thank you. Council, I'm going to move to item number 2, unless there's anything further on this. We won't take a break, but it is a work session. It's informal. Feel free to excuse yourself if you need bathrooms in this new facility, or right out the door and to the left.
Mayor,
for anybody who needs it.
I just wanted to make sure that the city administrator was not hoping we would discuss timelines of, so we don't need to address late fees or anything tonight.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
More to be said, but the critical point is there are no shutoffs planned at this point, and also payment plans, installments are encouraged. Reach out to either council members or city staff.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Very good, thank you. Then with that, we will move on to the next and final item on our agenda tonight, the Billings Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Alternatives Program. Laura Maddox, our Transportation Coordinator, is our presenter. Laura, welcome.
and Mayor, as we're getting set up there at the end of the night, there will be some things I'd like to just plug relative to snow plowing while this has all been going on, as far as what our crews are out there doing, how our customers can help us, and our drivers can help us. So,
You know, Chris, I meant to have you do that early. Why don't you do it now while they're getting set up, and now if somebody's watching, you don't have to wait till the end of the program, because that could have relevance tomorrow morning.
thank you, Mayor. So, in brief, where it's always good when the weather reports turn out to be the case. So we've had around the clock, so 12-hour shift, two 12-hour shifts yesterday, starting at 8 a.m., ending at 8 p.m. New shift coming in 8 to 8. They were plowing, sanding, and using liquid on intersections to help improve things. Couple things. Those trucks, if you are tailgating them or too close to them, they have no idea you're behind them. So please give them space if you are driving. B, they started this afternoon getting into neighborhoods. So that neighborhood plowing kicked in, starting in section 2. So whether you're social media or traditional media, or you look at our website, that section 2 is kind of in the core of town, south of Poly, west of Virginia. And I'm trying to think what the southern boundary is. I had it here. But that's the neighborhoods that they're starting in. It's both at a minimum of 7 and 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Public Works will produce updates as to where they are in the plowing process. If you will please keep your cars off the streets. That's not possible for everybody, but where you have a driveway and you can get your car off the street, the plowing goes much more quickly and the quality of the plowing is exponentially better. So those are ways customers can help us. And then last but certainly not least, again, as there's some 60,000 properties in town, they try to be sensitive to dropping and raising that gate to not leave a great big pile of snow in people's fronts of their driveways. But it is downright impossible to do that perfectly, especially when you get these levels of snow. Please help your neighbors. If you have a neighbor who can't get out there and do it, the quicker you can help them before it, we get some warm weather that melts this and locks it in, the better. So those are really the plugs. We will continue to work around the clock, expecting snow pretty much, I think, throughout this week. So thank you, Mayor and Council.
Very good. Thank you. Back to Laura.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As stated, this is just an overview of the Billings Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Alternatives Program. Catch up. No. Let me try that one. Okay. All right. Thank you. So just a little bit of background on this program. This originally was our Community Transportation Enhancement Program that was a very long time ago. Once the new transportation bill came out in the late teens of 2000, it turned to the transportation alternative and it became a overall grant program that was delivered to the states through USDOT. In the past, most of our projects have been done based on a grant application to the state. In 2021, the new transportation bill changed that to allow metropolitan planning organizations to administer their own projects with oversight with the local DOT. So the MPOs within the state of Montana, Billings, Missoula, Great Falls, recently added Gallatin Valley, which is the Bozeman, Belgrade area, and Helena and East Helena MPOs were added. We all now administer our own projects. We as MPOs cannot apply for the funds. Local government has to apply for the funds, but we administer the project through the MPO. The funding outlook for this round of TA funds is just a little over $1.7 million. And as I stated, the applicants have to be a city, county, or tribal organization. Nonprofits are not eligible to apply as a primary applicant. they have to get sponsorship through a local government or tribal entity. Just a little bit over the process. This process, we pretty much follow MDT's process for their transportation alternative program. All projects are recommended to be locally governed and administered through local agency guidelines. These guidelines are developed by usually your public works department. So for the instance, 2 years ago, we received funding and funded the Stagecoach Trail project. City Public Works is administering that project. As I stated again, nonprofits are not eligible to apply. These are some of the eligible projects underneath that funding. It can do pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, sidewalks, infrastructure, crossing infrastructure, traffic calming, ADA projects, and transit is also eligible to be used for this. Again, abandoned rail corridors, we don't have a lot of that. All our rail corridors are in use. And you can do scenic overlooks and construction of turnouts. We've never used the funds for that. Most of our funding has been for bicycle and pedestrian facilities as well as ADA projects. When we had the Community Transportation Enhancement Program, Public Works would often pick a corridor like Fifth Avenue West and do all new ADA accessible ramps at the intersections and those types of projects. Safe routes to school are also eligible projects under this plan. Historic preservation, oddly enough, the Billings Depot, because it was a railroad depot, was eligible for CTEP funds a long time ago because it's related to transportation. Pavement preservation is also a eligible expense. So if we had a CTEP project that we did 20 years ago and that trail was falling apart, we could technically apply for pavement preservations to redo that trail to bring it back up to standards. Just some things that are not eligible, education activities. This is really made to be a kind of a bricks and mortar project, landscaping, historic preservation unrelated to transportation, museums, those types of things. I will state that under the safety and education activities, Safe Routes to School, some of those are eligible for transportation alternative funding. This is the evaluation scoring, and this is based on MDT guidelines. We based ours on the same thing. So it's the eligibility, so to make sure that they are being sponsored by the proper entity and that it's a project that can be funded with TA, a project description, benefits, and the project risk analysis, which is a pretty big one. This is to look at to make sure you don't have any right-of-way issues, utilities, those types of things that could be a fatal flaw in the project. Potential projects that we have heard about, these are not set in stone. This is just as the MPO, when we go out and do our presentations, this is what we've been hearing. Again, in February, we held a public meeting to present this information to, we invited city and county staff, we invited nonprofits, those agencies, neighborhood task forces, those types of agencies to come and hear about an overview. We met with the Parks Department and talked to them about several projects. The project they were most potentially interested in was looking at the Colson Park Trail connection. This is in our CIP, and this is the connection from the bike lane on 25th Street, and then at 8th you cross over to 26th to go down Lillian, and then there is a connection opportunity that goes underneath I-90 that would connect to Colson Park. So it would provide an access, non-motorized access from downtown to Colson Park. That one is being supported also by Billings TrailNet. They're willing to pay some money for some preliminary design work on that. Again, this is not a set project. It's just what we've heard. Another one potentially, along with Colson Park, was potentially the Alkali Creek Trail connection, which is up in the Heights. Met Transit is interested in looking at potentially applying for some funds to help enhance their connectivity and their area around their bus transit areas to make sure that people have good access to their transit. And then, of course, the city has mentioned potentially applying for additional Safe Routes to School projects for TEA funding. So I just wanted to bring these projects forward. This is a great opportunity for City Council to provide input to staff, potentially direction on if you would like to apply for any of these funds. I just wanted to be very open about what we've been hearing as the MPO. This is the timeline. We opened the application period for this in January 10th. We held our public meeting in January 14th, and the applications are due by April 9th of this year. Just some additional resources that were included in your packet in the presentation. And all this is on our website for our Transportation Alternatives Program. And I would be very happy to answer your questions.
Very good, thank you. Councilor, any questions for Laura? No, Councilor Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. Laura, I'm sorry, when you were on the slide talking about the Colson Park, you mentioned something about a Heights Trail. It wasn't on the slides. Can you explain what that one was and where'd you hear it?
Yes, the Colson Park Trail was probably the one project the Parks was most interested in just because of the activities going on for the Colson improvements. However, the other one they were potentially interested is the Alkali Creek connection, which when you come out of the Main Street tunnel under Main Street and come to the west side of Main Street, right now you connect to the sidewalk that goes around to Swords Lane to get to the Aronson Trail. The Alkali Creek connection would actually connect where you come out from Main Street behind that along Alkali Creek directly to Aronson. There's benefits to having that connection. Not only is it more of a direct route that you don't have to go around the sidewalk along Main Street and Swords Lane, but it also provides another access for parks for maintenance to get down in there. They're already maintaining both sides, both ends of that trail. So that was another one that we're potentially interested in. That's another one that Billings TrailNet was willing to put some funding towards a preliminary design and alignment to look at that, how that would work.
Okay, Mayor, quick question then.
On that one, because I've got to follow up on that one if you're going to move on to a different topic.
I'm going to move on to a different topic, but if you want to go ahead and ask a question and come back.
So
it'd be great.
on that, that's a critical connection that we've looked to try to complete for almost 20 years now. But and it's short and affordable, but potentially aesthetically attractive if it's down along the creek. But the issue is always right away. Is there the possibility of getting the right of way?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. That project is we would look at easements rather than right of way to cross that. Ownerships have changed. There has been some additional support of those property owners behind those where that potential trail alignment would be to support this. So we're pretty encouraged that we could get the easements to make that connection.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councilor Bernice.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So I guess the question is, are you always looking for different trails and things like that? For instance, is brought to our attention, Parks owns a very large park under the power lines. And it actually goes all the way from Aronson all the way up to really the dog park, but it could also split off to the Castle Rock Middle School and Skyview, which would be great safe routes to school trail. And it's a very, very long trail. Has that entered into your discussion at all?
It hasn't come up this year, but we have discussed that project in the past. I think one of the things we're looking at is when that corner develops, the availability to put that trail in at the time of development to help pay for part of the cost of putting it in. The state, when they did the platting, and Wyeth, you can correct me on that, when they did kind of the subdivision, it was kind of identified as a potential trail corridor through there to connect those houses up to through there up to like Skyway Drive and Wicks.
So Mayor, if you don't mind to follow up on that. So the development of that trail has to wait until that state land is developed?
We don't currently have an easement to put a trail through there. A lot of times what we do is when we have vacant land like that has been platted for zoning of various items and stuff, when they come in for subdivision platting, we can look then at applying to getting at least the easement and for that trail through there. It's difficult for us to do that since we don't own the property, but we could approach the state to see if they would provide an easement. But I'm not sure the benefit of putting the trail in before the development occurs with the concern of it getting torn up and not in the right place, that type of thing. I think it would take a little bit more collaboration between the developer of that parcel and when we want to put that trail in.
Okay, and maybe Wyeth can answer this question, but it wasn't too long ago we approved a zone change up there, and they're going to be building some storage units up there. Is that anywhere near the development where we could have a trail, an easement put in for that project that's coming, or is it already too late for that?
Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council. So a couple things to add on to what Laura said. So that whole area that the state has planned for development, they did a master plan of that subdivision, and then the only part that's actually been platted is a little piece to the far east toward Castle Rock. The parcels you're talking about where they're proposing the storage up near the substation is actually kind of off also to the side of where the substation, obviously the power lines come through there, but the connection would actually go, I think, a little bit east of where that substation or where that storage property is to get over to Wicks and then connect up to like the school and such. So if there is a master plan that shows that alignment, but it's a portion that they haven't yet actually platted. It's in their master plan.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Ripsis.
Thank you, Mayor. Laura, just to Councilmember Neese's point, we could very well look at a project that just does the portion that we already control, which is from Aronson to Governors, right? Without going into the Skyview Ridge property further west. We already own that stretch under the power lines from between Governors and Aronson. We could look at that, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. But Christy was here earlier talking about Yellow Jacket Trail. That didn't come up in any of your conversation. Is that because of the feasibility analysis and all the unknowns that are out there right now about it?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Rupsis. Yes, so when we started talking about the transportation alternative projects coming forward, one of them was we've heard a lot from the community about the need for Yellow Jacket Trail to get up to the top of the rims. We met with MDT initially to talk to them first because when we did the Rims to Valley study, we talked about potentially putting the trail on the guardrail side or looking at some type of other facility. Talking to MDT, because of where that road is situated on the side of the rims, it's very difficult to try to plan to put any type of non-motorized facility basically on either side of that roadway. So with that in mind, Billings TrailNet says, well, maybe we need to do a feasibility study to look at an alternative connection, how we get up there. Maybe it's coming from behind the baseball field there at MSUB and working our way up to the parks to the top and making that connection. There was just so many unknowns that it didn't seem like it was going to be feasible to apply for that this year. And when we met with Parks, we brought that up, and they didn't see how with only $1.7 million and the multiple needs we have that it may not be, one, ready to apply for, and two, maybe not enough funding to actually construct it. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Councilor Roushlider?
Thanks. I don't think it's any surprise where I feel this money should go. We've got tens of millions of dollars of safe routes to school stuff that is easy to be ready, easy to be implemented. And I'd be hard pressed for somebody to stand in front here and make an argument that, some trail connector that a small fraction of recreationalists in our community use is more important than working our way through our safe routes to school program. It's going to be hard for me to support anything that's not safe routes to school through this TA program. And we could do safe routes to school for 10 years through this and still not be to the end of it. We're putting public works dollars behind safe routes to school in a limited fashion. This would certainly be an indication to our communities who are begging us to improve routes for our kids to get to their schools safely, that we hear them and we are moving at a rapid pace, as rapid as we can. It's hard to be taken seriously, I think, when we have these opportunities at our hand, at our disposal, but we choose to spend them on, the Stagecoach Trail, which we're going to build and we're not going to be able to afford to maintain. And the first time we get a rock slide, Parks is going to be asking Public Works to fund the repair because they don't have a budget for it. So to me, this is a very easy conversation about leveraging these dollars to work through safe routes to school. And God, I hope that that's the direction that we go. And I don't know what we need to do from council or what we need to do in coordination with Public Works to make sure that we get some of these that are already identified and very easily ready to get into the pool, but that is most certainly where my support is gonna go in this program. And frankly, if I put my MDT commissioner hat on, these trail projects are not anything that I ever support, regardless of what district they're in, because I think it's an absolute waste of public dollars and public facilities. So if we can do that to improve safety for kids going to school, I'm 100% on board. But supporting trail applications are not anything that I'm ever going to get behind. So that's my position.
Well, I have to respond to that one. Whoa, the voice of God. No, my point is every project should be judged on its own merits, and we shouldn't be looking black and white, trails are good or bad, but everything on their merits. My concern with putting too much money in the Safe Routes to School program is we already have dollars going in the Safe Routes to School program, A, and B, we already have a mechanism for improving our sidewalks. We put that on the adjacent property owner. So we have funding opportunities for Safe Routes to School, and we need to look very carefully and continue to work on that program, no doubt about it. We have zero or virtually zero dedicated funding source for trail construction. So my best argument to the contrary is exactly what Councilmember Leiter said. We could spend the next 10 years putting money into Safe Routes to School and building more sidewalks that adjacent property owners could be assigned the cost of and never get to trails. So they bring incredible economic value, recreational value, lifestyle quality to continue to attract and retain people in our community. So they have a lot of value in my mind, but reasonable minds can differ on that, and we'll just have to look at individual projects. So,
and again, this is an opportunity for council to give staff direction on these types of projects. So, as I said, these are just things the Billings NPO have heard. The Safe Routes to School is obviously a very big part of that, as well as potentially making the connection to get folks that can't drive or anything on our system to use that as a transportation system. That's why we brought this forward to a council at a work session, because this is an opportunity for you to provide that input and guidance to staff.
That's why we have these work sessions. Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor. I think one of the things that I'd like to see us focus on more, and again, it has to do with Safe Routes to School, is some of the traffic calming. I think it was Governor's Boulevard, I believe it is, or maybe Nutter has a bulb out, and those are pretty expensive. But it actually does provide that ability for people, pedestrians to cross there easier and stuff. I think we need to identify some of those areas around some of the schools to make sure that we're giving those wider intersections like that, the arterials or collectors where they have to cross some safer routes. So that would be a great way to spend some of this money on there. Again, getting to that Safe Routes to School, but also getting the pedestrians. So I'd like to see a lot of that done if it's not trails, because it is, when we create a trail, it is tough to afford for us to maintain that. To Mayor's point, if we do sidewalks, the property owner is responsible for clearing that, not the trail association. So I think there's a happy medium in that, but I believe we need to work on some of those traffic calming for those bulb outs for those kids walking across the street. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Shaw and Councilmember Rowan.
Thank you. I am a trail supporter, so you're wanting to hear from us, and so I just want to communicate that I want to see all the projects on their merits scored as they get scored, and not just throw anything out because for arbitrary reasons. But my question for you is 13.4% local match. Where are we getting this money from for any of these projects? So whose budget is this coming from? Is it coming from the general fund? What's the conversation around that?
Thank you, Mayor, Council Member Shaw. Most of the time in the past, a lot of the local match actually was contributed by Billings TrailNet. So in the case of Stagecoach Trail, the Parks Department, it had budgeted some funding. That project's over $5 million. They budgeted, and please correct me if I'm wrong, around $800,000. But on top of that, Billings TrailNet then came in with $100,000, so it dropped it to $700,000. And then we were able to get a trail stewardship grant for another $100,000, so it's dropped the city parks match down to $600,000. So That is a question that always comes up. Who's going to provide the local match? A lot of times in these connections that we do, Billings TrailNet steps up and provides the local match, but often in conjunction with some parks funding as well.
Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Rowan, Councilmember Gula.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you can count me in the Safe Routes to School camp, but I think also things are not inherently black and white. I mean, there are critical trails that are safe routes to schools, and these things work together. So I think where we can try to accomplish multiple tasks with a single project, we should endeavor to do that. One of the things that I struggle with, and Laura, this is not something I'd expect you to answer tonight, but a broader maybe policy conversation for us to consider, is when we talk about our trail kind of commitment, I think a better clarity for me, at least on understanding the overarching purpose of our trail network would be helpful. If what we're talking about is predominantly a recreational, scenic trail, enjoy the community on the weekend, that is a set of conversations. If we're talking primarily something that is a commuter network, that is a different set of considerations. And I still think we don't always say, of course, we want both, all things being equal, lots of resources, both are great to have. But in order of prioritization, I still think there's a conversation about what exactly we're trying to accomplish with the trail network. That clarity exists very precisely with Safe Routes to Schools, and so I'm drawn to it for that reason. We very much know what we're here to do. We're here to encourage kids to be active and to get there safely and to support families in getting their kids to schools. That's super clear, and so I think it, for me, has a higher policy priority. I don't mind going through the projects on their merits, but I would like to see us be much more robust in getting kids safe to school. Mayor, if I could just take a very brief privilege. I have not had a moment yet to say, but I want to say super loudly that I know you have championed wayfinding in our community quite a bit. The wayfinding up on the Skyway Drive and Skyline Trail is gorgeous. And it's so well done. It is such an asset. It makes those trails so lovely. The multimodal trail along the road, and you've really captured some of the things that the community can access. I just wanted you to know, I think it's really well done, and it really does make our trail network that much better. So thank you for that leadership.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Owen. I'm sorry, Mayor, if I could.
No,
I would have to give kudos to that to Sanderson Stewart Sandbell for the development of that wayfinding package, as well as our beloved community historian and Western Heritage Center Director Kevin Koister for developing kind of the information for some of the other beautiful signage and stuff up there, and Public Works for their work in making sure all that signage, and Parks. It was definitely an all hands on deck. I did want to briefly talk a little bit about, talking about recreation versus transportation. As a Billings MPO, we really are focusing on transportation connections. So even though we may approve some trail connections, it's really talking about how to move people either through on-street separated pathways or using our park system as a way to be able to allow people to get from one place to the other without having to get on the major roadways. So it's a combination. When we talk about it as the MPO, we're really talking about transportation connections and how, when it comes to trails, how those are actually connecting our transportation system for people to get around. A lot of our recreational trails are done through a different funding sources, recreational trails program. So like the work that's going on right now in Riverfront Park and those types, that's a different type of, that's a recreational trail. When we look at an MPO, we're really talking about how we can make those transportation connections, whether it be through a park or a trail that really can move people around the city.
Very good. Thank you, Councilor Aguilar.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I think trails, there's an assumption that broadly that they are just purely recreational, but I, for instance, use the trails a lot to get up like into the heights. I use the Kiwanis Trail all the time, and that is, as Councilmember Owen mentioned, as a great route to school as well. And so looking for the opportunities that leverage the most is certainly what we're looking for. But I also don't want to diminish the, I guess we got to focus on the transportation things, but in terms of physical health, but mental health very much. I mean, the activity of moving around, I definitely make me much more motivated and much more productive when I am in a much better mood. People you see on the trails are in good moods. They're smiling. And in our 2017 comp plan for the parks, the trails were the highest rated asset in our whole system. Again, that was looking more recreational perspective, but that is really key. And so I think, well, I even walked from my house to the airport, and so I would have benefited from a Yellow Jacket trail. I have to be pretty adventurous and little, almost take some climbing gear with me at certain ports. But so if that's not in the cards, I think some of the other trail connectors projects sound really good, and they do play a significant transportation role as well. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Anything else? This is a public, we'll have an opportunity for public comment here. Wyeth.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to add a little bit more to what's been said and also how we kind of go about looking at the projects. And I don't want to, not going to, speak for Debbie in terms of Public Works, but in terms of the conversations kind of overall. First of all, Councilmember Owen, a couple of you mentioned this sort of like the idea that some of these are not mutually exclusive. So we do want to look at opportunities where, whether it's a transit project, a safe routes to school project, a trail, something where we're able to make multiple connections or benefit from something that's going to help in a variety of ways. That's really important. And we're having those conversations as we look at these. We have also, I think one of the things when you talk about maintenance is actually true for everything that we're talking about. It's not just trails, it's safe routes to school, it's anything in the right of way, it's all that, parks. I mean, so I think, and you as a council have had a lot of conversations kind of overall about that issue, a lot of it in parks, but it's everywhere. So I think we all have to be recognizing that too. Whatever we're going to build, there's going to be maintenance required for whoever, however we're going to handle that. So we have to be aware of that too. And then also with capacity, I mean, as was mentioned in the presentation, we actually have a couple great things going on. But I mean, Public Works has got funds annually for safe routes to school. Absolutely, it would take us many years under that only funding source to complete those. We have a Safe Streets for All grant that we leverage, that we were able to receive for $3 million. We're putting that safe routes to school also. So we have things in the CIP right now for this year, built construction year. We have with our Safe Streets for All grant, we're looking at multiple years of construction using those funds to help supplement with what we have for the annual set aside for safe routes to school, and being able to use that as our local match. So we've got some really good stuff going on there, and potentially, I guess, depending on coming back to you or having further conversation about projects, we could certainly bring more of that detail to sort of share, because Public Works could show you what's in the CIP now, and then we can together show what we're looking at for that Safe Streets for All grant and how we can complete that as well. So anyway, across the board, I guess there's a couple different elements there that we're going to have to look at regardless of which project, but also trying to be, being able to take advantage of where those things overlap is a big deal. So thanks.
Thank you, Wyeth. And I imagine I speak for the council when I just ask or say that we agree with your observation that we'll need more information. We can't just, make these decisions in a vacuum, whatever that information might be. Councilmember Dees?
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions and maybe some suggestions, but one of it is, I think you mentioned you guys score these projects. Is that correct?
Correct. The scoring is completed by the Technical Advisory Committee, which is made up of city and county staff that have expertise. They are usually the ones that have put together these applications and understand them, but it's a group effort to actually review and score those.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that we as a council should look at, that scoring matrix, to find out really what the value is for one over the other. I think we've done that before in some public work stuff, but I think that's maybe something that should be brought to the council so we can actually evaluate that scoring and see, is it really in line with what the council wants, and so that we can make sure that matrix is there. And I don't know if you've had the ability to provide that to us, or we can set up a work session to cover that, but that may be helpful. So that way you're not off looking at projects and trails and I think different projects that the council really isn't interested in moving forward with.
Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Neese. So how these projects would come forward is the city council would ultimately make the decision on which projects are applied for. So if let's say Public Works does want to apply for $400,000 in additional safe routes to school money for projects that could occur in a couple of years from now, because that's about how long it takes to get a project going, they would come up with that project and they would actually bring that forward to city council for your support. So you would actually get an opportunity to vet those projects before they're submitted to the MPO. Again, when we receive applications, we may receive 2 applications from the county. So the last time we received a county application for sidewalk in Old Hardin Road on Hardin Road in Lockwood. So we based those review criteria based on MDT requirements. So our application mirrors the requirements for their application scoring. And again, a lot of that is risk analysis to make sure, are there any easements needed? Are there utilities that are going to have to be moved? Are there, fatal flaws potentially in this project? That all has to be outlined in the project application, as well as the benefits of this project overall to the use of the funding. So there are very specific guidelines that we follow when we review these applications, but they're not scored application versus application. They're scored on their own application, and then based on that ranking, we would make a recommendation to the governing bodies and ultimately to PCC to send that up to MDT.
Okay, so you're saying that these are all state guidelines as far as what they're scored against. The city has no scoring system as far as what should be recommended or not. That's once it's presented to the council, it's been through the state process, it's up to the council at that point to decide how they want to address it.
Councilmember Neese, you have to remember that these are not city funds. These are coming funneled through the MPO for use in our urbanized area. So the county can apply for funding, the city can apply for funding. And based on the merit of that application, the state they don't score the applications. We make a recommendation, the TAC will make a recommendation to the governing bodies, the City Council, Board of County Commissioners, Planning Board. They will all take action on those applications, and then ultimately those actions are forwarded to the Policy Coordinating Committee. They make the final recommendation on the projects, which the mayor is the representative from the city. So the city makes the decision right up front what you want to apply for. And then the MPO, again, through our scoring. We've never had an issue where we couldn't usually fund all the projects we receive. So like last time we received 2 projects, one from the city, one from the county. We were able to fund both of them. We've never really had that big time competition between city and county for those funds.
Or another question about transportation. You mentioned that these projects really are for transportation, like commuter transportation, not recreational transportation. And so I'm wondering when I look at the Kiwanis Trail, is that commuter? Do you measure the amount of commuter traffic on the Kiwanis Trail, or in fact, it's just the idea of the connection, the short piece there from Main Street to Alkali Creek? Are you measuring commuter traffic of that, or is that just a recreational pathway? How do you tell the difference between that? And the reason I bring that up is because you've got this on the potential projects of Colson Park Trail connection. When I hear the Colson Park, to me, it's one of those roads to nowhere. People are going to go there and it's kind of a desert. Yeah, they're going to do some improvements to it, but it's not a really conducive park to just kind of relax at because of all the traffic and air traffic, road traffic and air traffic. So although it does connect to the Kiwanis Trail, yes, right? And so really it's the downtown connection to the Kiwanis Trail. Now, recreational wise, I had a very difficult time taking the Kiwanis Trail to downtown because I had to go then off road, and just with our kids, it was like, watch out for these trucks and cars and stuff years ago. And so this would be a nice recreational trail, but I don't see it at all used for commuter traffic. So how do you justify putting the Colson Park Trail even in as a potential project when there really is no commuter traffic that would be down there?
Councilmember Neese, Council, I would actually say it is a commuter route. We can't differentiate between the users. We do our trail counts annually and stuff to keep updated with that information. But I'm going to use me for an example. I live down in Josephine Crossing. So my husband and I wanted to go to the fair. So we rode our bikes. And we rode down Garden Avenue, and then we jumped on the Kiwanis Trail, and we rode that around. And it really gave us an opportunity not only to not have to drive to the fair, but it gave us a great way to get there. I think a lot of people do use those park connections as commuter routes. I think a lot of people use the Kiwanis Trail to get to the Heights as an opportunity to do that. And
But your example was recreational though, right? Because you're going from your house to a recreational event. Or are you saying because you're just going to a recreational event, just because you use the trail, that's commuter traffic because because you're not using it for just, hey, I'm just out driving and, watching the birds fly, on the trail. That's has to be recreational. But if I'm going to recreate and go to like Lake Elmo from downtown, then I use that trail. That's commuter traffic because I'm going from downtown up Kiwanis Trail and going to Lake Elmo.
correct.
Even though it's recreation, but you're saying that's commuter?
To me, that I'm using an alternative form of transportation.
All right, I understand. Thank you.
Very good. Anything else before we, I don't see anything. Let's open it for public comment on item number 2. We'll come back to council before we wrap up. Is there any public comment on item number 2, the Transportation Alternative Program? Any public comment on item number 2? No one is coming forward, so we will close the public comment period on item number 2. Council, anything further on this item before we continue on our agenda? Don't see anything. Highlight upcoming agenda items, council interest. Chris?
Candidly, the focus was so on tonight and doing tonight well that I don't have off the top of my head what's coming in front of us here in the upcoming weeks.
That's okay.
We are back
We
in
understand.
this space. We will use a regular meetings, so we'll be sitting like this. But our next work session, we're gonna set tables up to be down at a table together. We just didn't want to try that new thing for something as critical as the audit. So, sorry I don't have more information for you, Mayor, but that's just the truth of where we're at. Thank you.
Great. There aren't any questions for Chris on that. Any issues of council discussion? Councilmember Owen?
Thank you, Mayor. As I mentioned earlier, and as I circulated around in emails to council members, I would like to circulate tonight a draft initiative proposal related to the audit tonight. So this is a fairly straightforward resolution that would essentially create a reporting function. So one of the recommendations that we heard tonight with respect to the audit was this sort of need for better or more robust performance metrics when we enter into projects of a certain scale. And all this does is encourage those to be reported up the chain. So the draft you see in front of you is a resolution that would ask the city administrator to just disclose the performance metrics for projects that meet a certain threshold. This is not designed to create sort of a secondary management, but rather just a reporting and awareness function that I think will help council in its discussion and consideration of projects and help us all be on the same page as to what we expect at the outset of a project rather than trying to figure it out in the middle of it. I think this is consistent with what the city administrator is doing in his revised administrative order. We've discussed it very briefly at a high level. It is my intent, at least, to be consistent with that administrative order, not create a new set of metrics, but rather just take what exists and have it be reported up. I think it's important that we do that, not just for council's consideration, but to really stress throughout the culture of the organization that kicking things up the chain is an okay thing to do, that people should know what we're trying to accomplish when we undertake a certain project. And everybody up and down the project chain should be able to say, whoa, time out. We're not hitting our metrics. We're not in line with our milestone. We're not focusing on our goals or objectives. So let's take a pause and see if we need to evaluate something. So this, you will see as you look at this draft resolution, there's some X's and some blanks and some bracketed because we definitely need some further discussion. I know and I agree that there is a important line to be maintained between council's role in oversight of budget and resources that are in the public interest and the city staff's administration of day-to-day tasks. It is squarely within the scope of the charter for the council to request reports and for the city administrator to respond, which is why this is drafted as a reporting concept. So I have circulated it tonight. I would like to have it on a future agenda for a vote. I welcome conversation from folks who have input into this, thoughts on how we resolve some of the bracketed language, and of course from the city administrator as well. So that is what's out there. Mayor, I don't know if you want to do any questions or discussions given the hour, but happy to have those conversations offline with anybody. But I would like to have this on an agenda for a vote in the near future, at least to adopt the initiative rather than to finalize the resolution.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, let's dispense with major discussion. I would just ask maybe some heads up from staff about the specific potential software conversions that might be in our future. It's hard to look at this stuff purely in the abstract, right? If we can actually put some possible real life application to it, might help in that discussion. So, okay, anything else on that then? Okay.
No, Mayor, just the request that it be on the next reasonable agenda for adoption as an initiative.
Okay, so that would be on the agenda for a vote on whether to put it on a later agenda.
Yes, I'm not smiling about not. I think what we've talked about internally at length is this only needs to go on one more agenda, which is put it on a work session agenda, have you vote it. Yes, we want to move forward that, and then we do that work, right? Not 2 more votes. It is 2 more votes?
Just one more vote.
Just one more vote.
But that's what Councilor Owen is asking, it be on an agenda for a vote about whether to proceed.
Correct, and that will be notified in there so everybody knows you're going to make a decision on it that evening.
But ideally, there would be a future vote then to adopt the resolution that comes out of the initiative.
Yes.
Okay.
Ultimately,
on the
path to
ultimate
work.
merits.
Yes, I'm
So
sorry.
2 votes.
Yes.
Or 3 or
To
4 or
implement.
100. Who
That
knows?
hurts my feelings, Bill. We're not having 100 votes.
One initial one about whether to proceed or not.
Yeah, if it's no at that stage, it ends. If it's yes, there's work to be done.
Right. Yep, exactly. Okay,
Mayor?
very good.
Mayor?
Public comment on non-agenda
Mayor?
items. Is there any public
Mayor?
comment on anything that was not on our agenda? I apologize, Councilor Bernice.
Yeah, Mayor, is there any reason why this can't be put on the agenda for next week? I know it's already published, but we revise agendas all the time. This would be a simple add-on at the end of the agenda for council initiative to discuss.
Well, if there were a true rush, but I think that there was a reason that we wanted to have these things on.
It's a
on
short agenda.
Work
There's only
session, right?
There's only 2 items, consent and one other item. No, we're only voting on it whether or not we want to move forward to put it on a work session. You have to first vote on the initiative to say, yeah, it's got merit. We have to vote on a business section first to say, yes, it has merit. Let's now move it forward to have it look at a work session.
Yeah, was there anything in our, we had this discussion the other day about whether these should go on a work session instead of a business. Last one was on a business meeting, created some issues.
Correct. So Mayor and Council, what we will do is follow, if we've got a rule of procedure that says that it's on a work session or a regular meeting, we will follow whatever that written process is. And I don't think whether it's a work session or a regular meeting matters relative to what it is, because it's a direction to administration to follow up on something. It's not a final policy decision that the public, that is not happening at a regular meeting. So let's pull that out, follow whatever that is, and whether that's next week or 2 weeks from tonight at a work session, we'll get it on the next meeting following that procedure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, very good. Back to public comment. Is there any public comment on things not on our agenda tonight? Any public comment on non-agenda items? No one is coming forward, so thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.